Carrying your teammates can be stressful and annoying, but learning how to solo squad can be easy. And today, we're going to be looking at some different tips and tricks that can help, such as awareness, drop spot, overbuilding, and we're also going to take a look at why players like Mongraal are so good at solo squatting. All of these tips apply to either solo squatting or if we're looking for some great ways to carry your teammates. I can't stress how important awareness is when fighting multiple players, but it hands down can make or break a fight. If a player catches you off guard and is able to pop a couple shots into you, it's going to put you in a rough spot, either requiring you to turtle up or build up to pop some minis or heals. There's two main ways to stay aware of where your opponents are. The first, which I recommend since this will allow you to be in the best position anyways, and is to be on height. This will let you see exactly where everyone else is in the fight, but as well, it'll allow you to see where the third parties are. Now the second is more so used on low or mid ground, but it's much more inconsistent. That is using sound as a way to determine where an opponent is. I recommend this as a last resort because, let's be honest, the sound is horrible. But are there any better alternatives for lower mid ground? It's a little bit iffy. You can't really rely on sights, and seeing through builds can be sort of difficult, and once the build fight gets big, it's almost impossible to see most angles. Now the only other thing that can really help is reading and predicting your opponents. If you're fighting someone who's rather good, there's certain things they do quite often, especially in box fights where certain edits and edit tricks are commonly used. This can be another thing to fall back on. Now there's two different drop types that I want to touch on because both have their benefits and downfalls. The first is a hot drop, and typically I see a lot of players struggle with solo squads because of their drop, which is understandable because hot drops can be heavily RNG dependent, especially in squads where the amount of players dropping is multiplied by 4. It can be hectic, but if you get lucky and you come out of your house with shield and decent guns, it will typically boost your end result of kills by 7 or 8. But there's a lot that goes into those early games. If you don't get anything that's good in terms of loot, you're going to have to rely on third partying and cleaning up fights. The other is a cold drop. These guarantee that you'll get loot and get set up for mid to late game, but this will also slow you down in a couple of ways. If you're set up and ready to fight, that means most of the other teams are going to be as well. So your fight is going to be more prolonged, and everyone you fight is going to be shielded up. Another thing that maybe is just me, but not getting into a fight in the beginning part of the game throws me off a little bit, and almost feels like I'm getting unwarmed up. So instead, I do something a little bit in between. I like to drop in Dusty Divot, where typically you'll only get one team, sometimes a second, but typically it's pretty low profile. And since Dusty is much smaller and enclosed, it also has a ton of trees and that large building in the middle, which stops players on the opposite side of the POI from being able to third party you, except for one spot. Holding height will be your best bet in locating and third partying players in the early game, and the building in the center of Dusty Divot is perfect for that because it provides a 360-degree view of the entire POI and will allow you to choose your fights much easier and identify where everybody is. The most crucial thing is to never turtle when there's more than one player alive, because more than likely, this will happen. It's harder to escape once you've enclosed yourself in your box because not only will you have to hold all of the walls that are getting spammed, but you also have to edit out and reset the wall behind you, all while having multiple people spamming you out from different angles. It can be difficult to escape from, and instead, I recommend building upwards to a point where you may be able to pop a mini or two. Now don't go up too high because otherwise you're going to be coming right back down. A little tip I keep in the back of my mind is typically if at least 2 players from the squad are building up to height, you can assume they may not be chopping you down, but if you're up there alone, you're probably going to be getting chopped out. I always try to carry some sort of fall damage negating item. Gladiator play is of course the best, but shadows and flintlocks work just as well. Now I would typically never recommend to overbuild, but it's sometimes something that's really needed. But you can't go crazy with it. You need to overbuild to a point where you'll be protected from anybody's shot, as you guys are seeing in the clip in the background, but as well, not to a point where you're just building to build. The difference between spending 20 extra mats to protect yourself means that you won't have to build up to height and spend even more mats just to pop some minis. As well, staying moving and constantly putting pressure on your opponents is huge. It can be difficult to get 4 players on board to do the same exact thing, especially in a squad pub match where players typically really aren't sweating their mind out. That pressure will make the squad split apart and be easier to isolate them individually. I'll touch on that a little bit more specifically later on in the video, but you can use this to your advantage, and constantly keeping pressure on your opponents will more than likely put them in a situation they're not very comfortable with, and then you can capitalize on their mistakes. Some little things to always have on your mind that may seem even silly to mention, but making sure you're keeping an eye on your mat and ammo count at all times. Especially if you get third partied, you can't always finish off the players you were fighting before and grab their loot, so it's quite easy to run out of the things you may need. A big thing is to always make sure you're reloading when you have time. When constantly applying pressure, you're going to run out of ammo often, and if you have to build afterwards, you might find yourself having a free shot on an opponent that you don't get to take since you weren't reloading your guns. I would say now it's probably really important to keep your shotgun reloaded as much as possible because the range on the combat makes it more useful in more situations, and having that full clip is going to help you out a lot. I recommend never trying to fight a squad from far. Peeking on 4 players and going for AR shots is not going to end up too good for you, and I recommend trying to close that distance in between you and your enemies, and bringing it to a close quarters fight is going to be much more beneficial for you. When I'm pushing towards a team, I always switch over to brick or metal, so when they do spam me out on my approach, the brick and metal will protect me for longer and will save me from burning through as many mats as I would if I stayed on wood. Once I close in, I'll switch over to wood because typically you won't get spammed out as much, and from there, it's all about isolating your enemies and picking them off. Some of the most common ways to isolate your enemies is by putting damage into them, allowing them to turtle up, and then fighting one of their teammates out completely. It sounds a little goofy and backwards, but if you think about it, if you crack 2 players on a team for 75 to 100 shield each, that can cause them to play more slowly than the others and will allow you to fight it as a 1v2 instead of a 1v4. This can easily be done on height, as you can aim downwards and shoot players who are pushing up to height on you. But make sure you don't get tunnel visioned. It's so common to see players make this mistake and put out a ton of damage that they think, okay, only one more hit and then I'll get this guy. But during their tunnel vision, they give up every single piece of advantage they had and put themselves in a bad spot just to secure one elimination. Now, when I was beginning this video, I wanted to see what made some solo squatters so good at it. And when watching a video from Mongraal, I picked up on a lot of cool things. Mongraal does a great job at isolating his opponents, and as well, the way he would do it is by blocking every angle that the other players would have on him. And then from there, he can continue to focus one player. But he would never get tunnel visioned, and after he would send some shots out, and before any of the other players could reach him, he would edit out and make a really fast edit play to suppress his other opponents. The fast edit plays and shotgun shots take most players by surprise and will keep up with slowing down your opponents. As well, Mongraal mentioned something very interesting, and I kind of liked how he worded it, and he said it exactly as, "He stopped my momentum, I got no mats, no shield, and the other guys got away." Now this was directly after he got out of a fight with a squad that was full of some TTV sweaters, and he burned through just about everything he had. And now he either has to clutch up with not much available and hopefully come out alive, which is quite difficult to do in solo squads. Or the other option is to spend time looting areas and farming mats, both of which slow down the momentum you do have and are drastically going to affect how many kills you'll be able to get. Mongraal is also insanely talented in terms of mechanics. His edits, builds, and aim are all incredible, and that's a big aspect of what makes him so good at solo squatting, and overall makes him really good at the game, because even if he has to fight 2 squads at once, he can handle the fast edits and the stressful situations. And being able to react and adjust to those situations is important, and that is a skill that can't be taught in any video. Learning how to handle those situations is something that can only be learned in-game, and I recommend either playing a ton of solo squads or playing customs, because the only way you can learn and work on your mistakes in solo squads is simply by playing them and figuring out what things you may have messed up on. And customs are great because in late game, they're kind of hectic and there's a lot of things that need to be done and fast decisions that you really can't replicate anywhere else. And they're also great to learn those fast reactions and getting your reaction time up. Positioning in solo squads will not only help you start the fight in a great spot, but will also allow you to make sure you won't get third partied, which is one of the many ways solo squatting can go south. Being in a spot where you have height is of course a great spot to be in, but making sure you're not taking fights in commonly rotated spots will help as well. Loot Lake is a great example because players from Pleasant, Tilted, and the block will more than likely congregate at loot because the slipstream will bring them there. You can take fights here, but make sure you're in a spot where leaving or repositioning is an option. For example, staying close to the slipstream will be one of the best ways as it provides some of the best and easy to use movement in the game currently. Solo squatting can be a great way to improve many aspects of your gameplay. Things such as positioning and managing those stressful situations are at the forefront. But Thank you guys for watching today's video. If you haven't already, make sure to follow me over on Twitch, which I'll have linked down below. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe for future tips and tricks. And make sure to check out some of the playlists on screen if you're looking for some great creative mode maps, or if you want some more tips and tricks right away. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.